You see a red dot.
The recording should be started, sir.
Not
Yes,
yet.
I can see that.
Yeah, now start.
Yeah. Right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good
Are we
afternoon.
ready to start for the day? We are moving to day 4. It's about contracts, change order, administration, and claims management. I have with me my colleague panelist, Mr. Shyam Ramurthy. Okay, let's see what all we are going to see today. To understand how properly drawn contracts can minimize risk errors. To understand the different components of costs. To identify the different types of contracts and their merits and demerits. To understand the significance of contract package. To understand the importance of contract bonds and types of liability, then insurance available, and then, okay, sorry. To understand the consequence of change order and the types of changes. Right, ready, let's start. Okay, so first, let's try to see what is a contract. Okay, what is a contract? So we have been talking about contract for the last 3 days. So a contract is a mutual business recognized by law under which one party undertakes to do the work and or a service for a second party for a consideration. See, when you say consideration, it is not in kind, it is money. Okay, so let's see a better definition. A contract is an agreement between two parties. One is called the contracting party or owner, and the other the contracted party or contractor to perform a previously determined scope of work for a previously determined amount of money. See, look at the second explanation, second definition. It's much more clear. It's a contract between two parties. That means the contracting party who is the owner and the other one is the contracted party who is the contractor to perform as previously agreed according to the scope of work for a previously determined amount of money, okay, which is called the consideration. Okay, so I have a question for everyone. Is contract the same as a purchase order? Is contract same as a purchase order? And what is the difference between the two? Okay, from the participants who have joined, how many of them? 4? TR 4?
That's right.
Right. Okay, who's going to say?
Today we don't have method.
Louder, please. Go ahead.
So purchase contracts only talk about tangibles, right?
Purchase contract. Okay, can you be a little more?
Like when it comes to purchasing goods, when it comes to purchasing raw materials, it's only
Right.
Can it also include intangibles, like when it comes to service, etc.? Purchase
When you say intangibles, can you be more specific?
I mean service, sir, like a particular type of service that an entity is performing. Okay,
so including the services. Okay, right. So, okay, good answer. You're on the right track. But again, can it perform a contractual function from a purchase order? Or is it a part of a contract only? Or is it an instrument Okay.
Allow me to give a hint, Professor.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Please go ahead.
For the four participants, just imagine and visualize a purchase order. The purchase order could be for a product, or like what you said, Nimisha, an intangible, which could be a service, right? A service also gets defined finally. So if you were to imagine this, what does the purchase order from the owner or the one who's called the contracted party, like in the second definition, tell the contractor? Just expand what you just said. Would anyone like to venture?
I think a purchase order is a part of a contract, right?
Good.
Contract is more, it's more diverse, it has more points to it, it has more information regarding the entirety of the business and not just the tangibles and intangibles related to the transaction.
You're there. You're absolutely right. So a purchase order is from, let's say, me as a contracting party to you as a contractor, stating my expectations from you. Yeah?
Yes.
So far, so good?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Now, when you said, if you just roll over what you just now said, a contract would be a much more or a more wider encompassing entity or activity, because you would now have to come back to tell the contracting party, which is me, not only what you have understood, but also put down maybe all the terms, the conditions, and what are the landscape in which you are working and how you'd be able to deliver on that agreement.
Got it, sir.
Yeah,
Okay.
Professor, I'm sorry. I am sorry.
No problem. No problem. That's what collaborative teaching is all about. Okay. Having said so far, I want to move on to a new contract. Okay, in line with what we have been talking. That's called a sales contract. Okay, a sales contract. Let me try to show you a slide. Okay, now before that, let's finish this and then we will move to sales contract. What is the need for a written contract? Because lack of trust. Let's get everything in black and white because we are talking with money. So let's get everything, in black and white. Clearly establish the risks and obligations of each party. See, it's very vital. Okay, we have so many instruments in the contract as well as in the purchase order wherein the risk and obligations are bifurcated, and we are going to see more about risk today. Provide means by which performance can be assessed and measured. Provide means by which breaches can be identified. Provides means by which default can be established. Establishes the owner's means of control and establishes the contractor's scope of work. So you can understand a contract is an essential document. Everything has to be written in black and white. So there is no ambiguity. Okay, any amendments can be incorporated. There's no problem. But essentially, you got to have the basic documents, and as and when you go along, okay, you can add. There could be change orders. All this will be part and parcel of the contract. It will be all appendix to the original contract. Okay, I hope it's clear. Can we now move to what I was talking about? Okay, what I want to demonstrate to you is how does international trading takes place? Okay, let's take an example. There is a trader who participates in all large tenders. Let's say the tender has been floated by a large organization like SR Steel. Okay, they have floated a tender. They have provided an RFP wherein it's an it's an imported machinery. Okay, so what our trader in Bangalore he did, he started trying to source where it is available, and he found a supplier in France who has got the same product. Okay, now as you know what we said in the first day, an RFQ provides all the details. Okay, so all the details are available. Okay, based on that he was able to understand, yes, there is a seller in France. So what does he do? Okay, so he raised an RFQ, request for quotation. Okay, now why is he raised an RFQ here, not an RFP? Anybody? Our buyer, okay, or let's say trader, okay, has requested for an RFQ now, because the reason is, I'm just taking you back to day one. In the RFP, we have got all the details, all the technical details, everything is given in the RFP. So based on the RFP, now you are in a position to make an RFQ, request for quotation, to the seller in France. Okay, so the seller in France provides a performer invoice with all the technical details, including freight charges up to the port of destination. Okay, mind you, this is called performer invoice. It is not a commercial invoice. Why it is not a commercial invoice? Because the transaction is not over. Okay, right, this is known as a performer invoice, wherein in the performer invoice, okay, the technical details will be given, the price of the product, the cost of the product, the freight cost, the insurance cost if it is required. Then it will also show the payment terms. Okay, what is the lead time? What are the the lead times? Okay, what are the payment requirements? Normally, international business is always considered under letter of credit. All these details are incorporated in the performer invoice, and it will also have a validity of the performer invoice, which can be 2 or 3 months. Right. Right. Now the performer invoice comes to the buyer in Bangalore or the trader. Then he makes a purchase order. Okay. Now purchase order is made by the buyer because they want to confirm the transaction. Okay. So when he makes the purchase order, he will put in whatever details have been mentioned in the performer invoice, plus he will add. Okay. For example, he may change the Incoterms according to what he feels is more beneficial to him. He will change the Incoterms. Okay. Now he can put very well an agent, a logistics, a 3PL company in France who is going to happen the shipment. Okay, let's say the Incoterm has been changed into X Works, X Factory. Okay, so the second one, they will specify who is the third-party logistics company, and also it'll show on the purchase order what is the negotiable instrument. Okay, I don't want to get into negotiable instrument and all that. It's a little more complicated now. Okay, and the purchase order is now sent back to the seller. Okay, now once he gets the purchase order, the seller will review it and he will go through the entire thing, and everything is in accordance with what he has given on the performance, and the additionals, what has been mentioned, is in agreement with it. Then the seller will send back to the buyer or a trader in Bangalore a sales contract. Okay, please understand what I'm trying to explain is a sales contract. So sales contract is a very important document between the seller and the buyer. If there is any dispute at any given point of time in the court, what they will ask for is a sales contract. Okay, so why I'm mentioning this, I don't want you to misunderstand between sales contract and the contract what we are talking about. But it's essential that you got to know what is a sales contract. Okay, any clarifications you need? Are you clear on this? Okay, once a sales contract is received at the buyer's end or the purchaser, okay, then this is the time he can open the letter of credit. Okay, is the process clear to everybody? It's essential. You got to understand how an international trading takes place and what is the importance of the sales contract. Okay, is it clear to everybody what a sales contract is?
Oh, yes, sir. But here in this situation, where exactly does the purchase order come? Like, is it included inside the sales contract?
Yes. Correct. Good question. See, the purchase order, who raises it? It is the consignee, right? The buyer in Bangalore. Okay, he raises the purchase order. Okay, and then he sends it to the seller. What the seller is doing is the seller is confirming the purchase order by giving a sales contract, okay, wherein he will reconfirm legally whatever has been agreed between the buyer and the seller. Okay, understood? Now let me go a little more further down so that there is no misunderstanding later on. In case there is constant communication or transactions taking place between the buyer and the seller, the buyer in Bangalore and the seller in France, there may not be a sales contract at all. Please understand that. Email communications between the buyer and the seller will constitute the sales contract. Okay, so that is why, okay, it is said that when you communicate with your your seller, okay, you got to use professional terminologies which is accepted in the industry. No conversation language. Everything has to be internationally accepted trading terms. You have to use it. Okay, right. Is that clear now? Nimisha, you
Yes,
are the
sir.
one.
Yes, sir.
Right. What about others? Is everything clear? Can I move on? Yes or no? Okay. Since nobody wants to say anything, okay, I'm moving on. Right. Let's move on because we are moving on to some very interesting situations here. I want to visualize these things in your own mind. Okay, that you are in the riding seat, okay, in the organization, and you have to make some tough decisions. Let's look at the contracting strategies. Priority of project management goals. See, this is the utmost goals which a project management company has. Okay, now I have one admission. Let me say that in the beginning itself. Now, in this module, what we are going to teach today, there will be so many reference to project management. Okay, we are not teaching you project management, we are teaching you contracts. But if contracts have to be effected efficiently, okay, and administered, it has to go through. We have to see at the same time project management. Okay, please understand. In our process of understanding contract administration, we are forced to understand or analyze the project management situations as well. Okay, so please bear that in mind. We are not deviating from the subject. It's part and parcel of the module. Okay, so in this, the main objective is to understand what is the cost of doing the project. Are we in line with the contract or are we deviating from the contract? Then comes the schedule. Are we on track? Okay, so when it comes to the schedule, yes, are we on track as far as the schedule is concerned? And then comes the quantity. Okay, so these are things which are very important. We will be talking about it as we go along. Then status of project definition. Okay, now when we talk about status of project definition, what it can be. Shyam, you want to elaborate on this point?
Sure. So, Professor Matthews just talked about project management being the overarching umbrella under which we are talking purely of contracts management, because a project may take or may have different contracts that are inside, and there could be some other activities also that it encompasses, right? So when you talk of projects, what comes to mind? I mean, projects are they undertaken only by one entity, or are they undertaken by multiple entities also?
Multiple entities.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And when you talk of multiple entities, what I actually meant, or what I actually wanted to understand and hear from you is, there could be private projects, there could be purely public projects, there could be a partnership like it happens nowadays on a public-private consortium. So there are projects that come more into the public domain or are much more visible to the public than some of the others. Now, if you were to look at private projects, the scope, the nature, and the glare in the public may not be as much as it is for a public project, if you were to put it that way. Because in the public project, everybody, like right from the person or the entities who are executing the project, to the district in which the project is being executed, maybe to the state, and it may even go across into the country, that they are all interested in knowing the so-called health of the project. I mean, if we were to take examples, if there is a nuclear power plant to be built, let's say, now this decision would be taken by, I'm presuming, the government. It would be the central government cascading down to the state government, which decides on the location where it's done, and therefore it has its own ramifications and the glare in the public domain that it starts attracting. So this is what we talk about, and similar is the case with, let's say, a huge power plant that were to come up. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of examples, but I just thought I'd restrict myself to these two. So when you talk of project definitions, so you talk about private projects, you talk about public projects, you talk about the public and private consortium projects also. So that's what it means when you say the definition by projects when you talk about.
Thank you, Shyam. Schedule and cost constraints. Just to add on to what Shyam has been talking, especially if it's a project which is public and which is under microscopic views for everybody, okay, the schedule and the cost constraints are looked at from various angles, okay, and people are answerable to it, Okay, the project manager, the immediate project manager, and the state government, everyone is answerable. Okay, first, it can be a facility startup date and availability of capital. Okay, now capital is another issue. We are not getting into it. Okay, let's assume that whatever we are talking, the funds or the grants are in the pipeline. Okay, by the way, just for information, any project which is coming for the first time is called a greenfield project. That means there has been no previous experience, okay, of setting up a plant. So it's called a greenfield project. Right. What is the state of the economy? Market urgency for the product, number of competitive bidders, workload of competitive bidders, vendor backlogs. Okay, see, look at the first one, market agency for the product. Now, the very title, the state of the economy, okay, is something which you have to understand. Okay, now it's essential that for a country or an organization, okay, they keep on, even if it is a recession, certain companies may engage in very large projects. Okay, because this is one reputational building up exercise, not to show that yes, they have a problem with finance or they are in trouble. Okay, so I've witnessed this situation where in the Gulf, even if it is a recession, yes, the country will keep on engaging in very large projects. This is to give to the international world, yes, there's nothing wrong in our country. Yes, we have capital and we are continuing with the large industrial projects, what we are undertaking. Okay, so the state of the economy is something very essential to know. Right, here is an excellent topic. Okay, please understand this very carefully. How do contracts minimize risk? See, it's a question which you should ask yourself. Can the contracts minimize risk? Okay, today the whole topic revolves on risk. So you got to understand quite a bit about risk. Okay, I will invite my colleague Shyam to talk about more about it. I will add in the end. Shyam, all yours.
Yeah. Sure. Thanks, Professor. So what exactly do we mean here by saying how does a contract, and when we talk of a contract, it's a good, well-worded, well-written contract, help in minimizing the risk. And the risk is at both ends. It is not risk at only one end. So if you look at the first quadrant, it which is the contract, provides the means to manage and allocate the risks. So a carefully well-worded, well-scripted, well-documented, and well understood by both the parties would manage and allocate the risks which each one of the parties has agreed to bear in the eventuality. So basically what you want to do is to share the risks appropriately with this vehicle, which is called the relationship that you're managing through the contract. So moving further, the contracting strategy then therefore needs to be built around the relationship between the buyer and the contractor, using the terms and conditions and understanding well what the risks are that are associated with financial cost, financial or monetary impacts, were one of them to be deemed as a failure. So far, so good?
Can anybody specify what you can think of where an instrument wherein the risks are very clearly defined or spelled out? Each one has got their responsibilities. Can anybody think about it? Has anybody learned what is Incoterms, international commercial terms? It's between whom? In the Incoterms, it's between the buyer and the seller. Okay, the responsibilities, okay, all these things are defined. The cost, responsibilities, who is to do what, all these are spelled out very clearly in the Incoterms. So you got to understand that. Okay, that is the first part what my colleague Shyam has been talking about. So it's very clearly demarked who is to share what. Okay, so Shyam, go on with the second.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Professor. So I was just about to come to that. So thanks for bringing that out. So what exactly are Incoterms? So he said international commercial terms, Professor Matthew. So Incoterms basically prevent confusion in both foreign and domestic trade because they're used widely in both these sectors by clarifying the obligations that each of the parties have, which is basically the prerogative of the buyer and the seller. So the buyer and the seller who are involved in either the domestic or the international trade use them to help understand very, very clearly what is to be expected by and from each one of them in their business arrangement and agreement. So keeping that as the guiding principle, as one of the examples of a parameter or whatever you call of a risk. If you were failure to manage this risk can result in 1, a misunderstanding, 2, cost overruns, 3, it could be a loss of market, and 4, it could be a loss in the quality or the service or the delivery schedule also. So we talked about schedule, we talked about cost, we talked about quantity or quality also. So all of these could have a detrimental impact on this failure to manage the Incoterms well. So finally, to round this off, the type of contract and the language in which it is written should flow from these relationships only. So it is very good. It is expected as you write contracts to have them bound completely and tightly. Like we say, it should be watertight so that there is no scope for, we keep talking of ambiguity. So there is no scope of ambiguity and the business is transacted smoothly. So it is extremely important that you are in a position to minimize risk in a contract.
Thank you, Shyam. Now, before I move to the next slide, I would like to express our distinguished Professor Saroj Kaul has joined as a participant. We are delighted, madam, to have you as a participant. You are one of the most distinguished academicians in the field of logistics and supply chain. We are really proud and privileged to be that you are witnessing our course. Personally, I've been associated with you, which you may not remember, in 2011 or 2012. In the context of, I contacted you for bringing the CILT courses in India. We'll talk about it later on. I just wanted to refresh your memory. So let me move on.
I remember, I very well remember. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, madam.
Yeah, I am also a CILT member. I am also an ISM member, and we work out on these programs here in India also.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So let's move on to the risk areas. Okay. Cost. Okay. My colleague Shyam has talked to you about possibility of the cost overruns and other financial losses. See, this is something one has to be extremely careful. Now, it may be premature to mention at this stage that as an organization, you got to have a risk management policy. It's essential. How many organizations do we have which has got a risk management policy? Okay, overall, holistically. Now, once you have such things, depending on the type of work, what you're involved, okay. So, I mean, I'm talking from my experience overseas, since we have been handling very large projects. As an organization, we take a liability insurance policy covering all aspects. Okay, individual projects will be insured separately, but holistically, as an organization, we cover with a liability insurance wherein all these activities, so that professional negligence, all these things are covered in the liability. Okay, so I worked exclusively on this field for quite some time, and we have taken shelter on this and recovered our loss. Okay, right. Now, quality, loss of desired quality of engineering and construction. Okay, now this is a very important aspect. What happens is, especially when it's a firm price given by the seller, okay, he has to abide by it. He has to provide quality products. Okay, now he cannot raise the price. So what happens is, invariably, without anybody knowing it, they try to subsidize it in some way or the other. It could be in the materials what they have bought. It could be the second quality. There are so many case studies internationally on this sort of issues. Okay, so quality is something which cannot be compromised at any stage. Now comes the time delays in schedule and resultant loss of market. Okay, so time is a factor which has to be looked into, and it has to be considered properly. Okay, now I wish to bring the second topic, the second day's topic, okay, where we talked about performance-based contract. Okay, performance-based contract is actually gives a lot of emphasis in covering all these aspects. The only difficulty, like what we said, it's only the difficulties to set up, understand what the terms are, understand how to set up deliverables, how to set up outcomes, and the performance. Once you set up, once you do the proper planning, set up all the parameters, then the project can be managed properly. All these risky areas will be covered in the performance management contract. Any questions? Are we, because we have to move quite a bit on the risk factors, so are we clear on the fundamentals?
Professor, I'd like to add on quality and time also, with your permission.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So if you look at quality, how does one ensure, because you have now through your RFP or RFQ given an absolute drop dead specification that you want, let's say for a bought out item which is fabricated, or for a fabricated item or for a bought out item. So there could be a couple of ways in which one could look or ensure that the quality is maintained to the desired impact and effect of what has been contractually agreed. Can anyone tell or go ahead and say how this could be done?
So by using various like quality control methods, by setting by setting a certain benchmark, and then making sure that those benchmarks are met in whatever stipulated time that the contract, specifies.
Yeah, it's in the right direction, Nimisha. It's in the right direction that you have given specifications. Now it's time for the fabricated unit or the bought out equipment to come in. So when you say benchmarks, I would go ahead and even drill down deeper to say that maybe the buyer could send to the seller's or the contractor's location an engineer to inspect and see whether everything is in order, is basis what I have stated in my purchase order and basis what has been agreed in the service contract. If there are other ways also to do it, you could have third party, what we call chartered engineers, who could on behalf of the buyer inspect the machinery, the equipment or the unit at the seller's location and certify that it is in the certify that it is exactly what has been the specification that's been asked for. So there are various ways in which one may want to ensure that the quality factor is maintained, because the flip side, on the flip side, if the quality is not maintained, it is not a good to go when it lands on the buyer's side. What it's going to lead to is in an overrun in the schedule, because it may get rejected. I would not want to use it as a buyer. I would want the engineer to come back and rectify, and therefore there is that time lag or delay. Right? So the quality and the time are also, I mean, they also go sort of hand in hand and they are linked together.
I would like to add one more. Sorry, Shyam,
no, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Right. With regard to what Shyam said about quality, he was talking about international inspection agencies. Okay, I would like to add one more aspect. Apart from inspection at the job site, they also supervise the loading into the container, which is very important. Loading as well as lashing and bracing inside the container. All this has to be supervised because damages can happen at any point of time. So what we are trying to say, that once you deploy an international inspector to supervise the quality aspects, okay, you can be 100% sure, yes, we have paid extra money to it, but we have an international accredited chartered engineer who has visualized the entire process and he certifies it. So this is how quality can be assured. Okay, at the same time, this is at the port of loading. Like what Shyam has already said, it can happen at the site of destination as well. Once it reaches the place, also it can be inspected to see everything is perfectly perfect as it was to be. Okay, so this is how quality can be measured, I mean, can be assessed if you take a little bit of extra effort. Okay, right. So let's move on to the next topic. Elements of cost: labor cost, material cost, equipment cost, overhead cost, direct and indirect, and then profit. Okay, so these are all various elements of cost, whether we like it or not. Yes, cost is there, and one has to be very clear about cost. Okay, you have to cover your cost. Right, this is an analysis of cost, and I'm requesting Shyam to take over. He's an expert in this field.
Thanks, Prof. Not as much an expert as you are, because it is very crucial as you do the funding for the project that you are aware of what you are going to spend and how you are going to spend on. What are the elements of cost that are there? The various heads that they go in. So there are the direct costs, and then there are the others which are called the indirect costs. And somewhere in between fall these overhead costs, which are, if not equally, can be segregated under the indirect or the direct costs. So if you look at the direct costs, so you have basically the work that you're going to do at the site and for the job on hand that you're going to do, that come as direct costs. If you were to take an example of, let's say, other than a project, the land, the machinery, all these would come under direct costs itself. The land, the machinery, the fabrication, etc., etc. When you talk of indirect costs, these come as operating costs, and these are costs which cannot be allocated to specific jobs. Yeah. Then you have what you call as profit margin that you need to keep from a contractor's point of view to see that you are in a position to not only deliver what the buyer wants, but you are in a position to also make a profit for your own organization, right? And there is, in the direct cost, when you say there is the complete cost that comes in, and in the indirect cost, it is purely, if one were to translate, it is a fee that is there. And in the overhead costs, when you split, so there is something that you do at the job site, and for the indirect costs, you have operating costs that come in. These two add together to make the total contractual obligatory sum, the total contracted sum, like we call it. So it is crucial to know which side of the costs that you are working on, where you are apportioning your funds to, the direct and the indirect. Equally important to know.
Thank you, Shyam. Now, let's move to fixed price and cost reimbursement. What are the basic differences? Let's see that. Let's see first the basic fixed price. What is a fixed price? Okay, now this is what this is what the owner of the project would like to have. Everything fixed price. Okay, so as far as the contractor is concerned, yes. Okay, all the risk has to be assumed by the contractor. Okay, fair and reasonable price can be established by using the scope of work. Okay, using the scope of work, the contractor has to come up with a fixed price. Okay, then educate professional inspection and supervision provided by other parties. Okay, all those things are fine. They are all part and parcel of the project requirements. Okay, but here the most difficult part is to give a fixed price based on the scope of work, the design and the specifications and the environmental and business conditions. So what you have to understand, see, there is one very important thing, the business conditions, the business environment. Okay, there are a lot of things which can happen over a period of time where you have no control. So it's essential, like what we have been saying yesterday also, to incorporate the right wordings in the contract. Force majeure, you have to explain it in your own way, because force majeure, the norm now is each one has to mention it according to what you want or how it is being applicable in your country or your territory. Okay, so this is what the problem with the fixed price is. Okay, and this is what the owners would like to have it. okay, as a piece of cake. Everything is there available. Okay, now cost reimbursement. Here the ambiguity is the scope and the cost of work not defined sufficiently to provide fixed price scopes. Okay, there's an ambiguity, okay, which can or will be resolved only over a period of time. So qualified contractors are unwilling to provide these sort of risks. Okay, they will not provide fixed price. So they are willing to accept this like a cost reimbursable, like what I said, the example yesterday. Cost reimbursable, both the parties may agree on certain parameters. Okay, we will supply you on cost basis. Okay, but our overheads can be between 20 to 25% depending on the circumstances. Okay, and they will spell it out. What are things which are included and what are the things where it has to be reimbursed. So these things are well laid out. The owner wishes to exert more control, develop designs as a project progress, and achieve technology in transfer from the contractors. Okay, here in a cost reimbursable situation, the owner wishes to take control over things. He wants to know everything. Okay, so he's very concerned about the costs which is being happening. Now on the flip side, okay, such sort of projects can get delayed because you got to get permission from the owner at each and every point of time. Okay. Now the owner has to be more sophisticated, okay, in contract selection as well as oversight. Okay, it is not that every contractor will accept cost reimbursable because he gets the feeling that, okay, there is so much of risk which he has to take, and he can be taken for a jolly good ride at any given point of time, however professional the owner is. Okay, now let's look at the advantage. Okay, let me request my colleague to take over. Ram, you want to take over the advantages?
Sure. So in a fixed price contract, what you see is that there is less risk to the owner. It looks so superficially and on the surface. Yeah. There is a substantial amount of law and administrative protocol that in a fixed price contract that needs to be done. A fixed price contract, no surprise, is known, the cost is known well before the project begins at all. So you are aware of what the price or the cost is going to be. The owner involvement is negligible or minimal. The owner also realizes that there could be price competition that he or she would not be affected by in a fixed price contract because the contractual obligations are already set and carved in stone. The contractor has an incentive here to finish early so that they do not get affected by the difference in prices over periods of time that may happen from time to time, right? So that's for the fixed price, the advantages that a fixed price contract has. Now, if you come on to a cost reimbursable, you can have the project or the construction as one that is phased out because you have the cost, you have a schedule on which it needs to be done, you know the time, and you can phase it out in a manner in which you can allocate your time and money both. In a cost reimbursable again, changes can be accommodated more easily by virtue of the fact that these are scheduled in nature. It also helps in having or reducing the adversarial reactions, which is basically the tensions that could arise while completing the contractual obligations between the contractor and the buyer, because both the parties are involved in finishing on time and within the budget. There is obviously also a reduced contractor contingency, which is included in the price in a cost reimbursable, because it is a cost plus that is going on. Right?
Thank you, Shyam. Right. This is the pre-qualification process. Okay, now in the pre-qualification process, the general practice in olden days was you have to submit in hard copy the entire set of documents. Thank God that we have technology now. You can do all the pre-qualification process entirely on using technology. Okay, and it's easy for the company as well. It can be archived. Okay, now as per rules, which can differ from country to country, the archived documents have to be kept in certain countries for a minimum period of 5 years, because they are all subject to audit. Okay, so these are the pre-qualification process, the financial strength and the credit rating of the company, then the previous experience on similar projects, organization, loss prevention programs, quality control, equipment availability. This is very important. Okay, you have to list out the equipment which are available for a project. How much do they have? And in case of a requirement, what are the things what they can mobilize, and also the time frame in which they can mobilize. All this have to be made available. Okay, now comes a very important one, availability of key personnel. You have to also show in the pre-qualification details about your management and their qualification and their experience in project management and other management in general. Okay, it's essential for the company to understand, yes, what is the background of the company? Are they qualified people? Do they have the right management? Okay, and one thing which is missing here, okay, it comes under the quality assurance, and okay, you have to show exactly where are you now? Are you in ISO, or have you moved to TQM or Six Sigma? All this has to be shown precisely as to where you stand. Right. Shyam, would you like to talk about the flow chart?
Perfect. So once you have done the pre-qual, it's now time to sit down and design and decide what you are going to do, what steps are you going to take before you release your RFP to a contractor or a set of contractors from who you will choose who you end up working with, and how you go about the entire process. So you start with establishing a plan of action, what all is required. And this would be with various, with the entire buying organization, various people who are there in the contract management side. You prepare a pre-qualification deck or document set. Once that's happened, you send it up to your supervisors or management for approval, and this is a submission that's done, which goes through a management review. Once that has been approved, it then goes to the contractors or the set of bidders that you have chosen, where the contracting team has done their homework, and the contractors subsequently develop a response. The response comes. There are different ways in which the responses can be scored or tracked, depending on various organizations. And a comprehensive bid slate or a document, a scorecard of sorts, is prepared on various attributes and factors. Once that is done and tallied, it goes back for the senior management or the contracting boss's approval, and it then is eligible to be released as a bid package to move forward to either issue a contract or issue a purchase order, whichever it may be. Alternatively, when you could, after you prepare your pre-qualification documents, you could prepare the contract draft itself if you know that there are not many who would be entailed to do the bids. Once the contract draft has been made, you go about reviewing the draft, because we said that it is crucial that you involve and get the legal aspects also considered. You revise the draft based on once the agreement within your own buying organization has been done, and revise it, prepare the job meeting with the contractor that you have chosen, and then finally release your draft or the bid package for doing the or carrying out the activities. So these two flow sheets, basically both of them navigate to move towards the release of the final document that would therefore give both the buyer as well as the contractor an understanding of what my request as a buyer is and what is expected of the contractor to be performed in terms of value, in terms of quality, and in terms of schedule.
Thank you, Ram. Let's move to the next one. Components of a contract package. What are they? Invitation for the bid, like what Sham has just explained. Instruction to bidders. Then bid form. Now, when you talk about the bid form, now what is being carried out is templates are given, okay? And it's a uniform one, okay? The details are fixed, are entered in the template, and it's circulated to all the parties so that everybody fills in according to the template. Then it's much easier to evaluate the tender as well. Contract form, schedule of plant, general conditions or provisions of the contract, special conditions, supplementary conditions, or special provisions. Now, performance schedule, price schedule, scope of work. Then comes specifications. See, in the specifications comes performance specifications as per the scope of work, okay, which we have talked about it yesterday. Now, when it comes to proprietary specification, yes, this is something one has to be extremely careful, okay, as to how you put it. Because if you do not put properly the proprietary specification, you can be taken for a jolly good ride and you will have no way to get it back to, even if you go for legal, okay, measures, you may not succeed because you have failed to put in the proprietary specification. Just to give an example, okay, let's imagine that you're buying an imported technical product, okay, a machinery from abroad. Now you have gone through the RFP procedures, you have got the quotation, the performer invoice, like what we have shown, all the details are given, okay. Now, then you have raised a purchase order, okay, a sales contract, all these formalities are given. Now, when you raise a purchase order, okay, you should give as much details as possible on the product what you're buying, okay. Now, other things which cannot be incorporated in the purchase order, you should put it in the SLA. Now, the issues which may come up as an argument or a point of contention is, let us say the order has been placed as of now and the lead time is 2 years. Now the question which is going to come up is, when the product is going to be delivered within 2 years, 2 years time, okay, what is the technology which is incorporated? Is it the technology what is when the purchase order has been placed or at the time of delivery? See, do you understand this typical situation? So it's essential that when you incorporate proprietary specifications, you got to be very precise. You should say technology, what is applicable at the point of time, at the point, okay, when it is going to be delivered. Okay, so essentially you got to mention that very clearly. Okay, and also, yes, if there is any additional cost, yes, it can be mutually agreed upon. Okay, right. Any questions on this one? Any questions, please? Please feel to stop us and ask questions. Okay.
I'd just like to add just one more thing also, Professor, if it's all right. The proprietary specification also helps in, it absolves you as a buyer of anything that, as part of a contract, you are buying something and it should not be something that, like you have when you write journals or theses, you have something called plagiarism. So similar to that, it helps in absolving the buyer of any legal recourse that could be put on by some other manufacturer or somebody else who's using that technology as proprietary. So it's crucial to get through the proprietary specification and absolvency certification also, so that your interests as a buyer are protected completely.
Thank you, Shyam. To add one more point, what Shyam has said, in the absolvency certification, they have to certify that the technology what is being used in the material which is procured is belonging to them. It has not been taken from any place, or nor they have violated any patent rights. Okay, they are the sole proprietors and they absolve us from any liability whatsoever which may come on the way. Okay, that's number one. It is also called the infringement of title as well. Okay, they are the sole owners of this technology and we are absolved of all liabilities. Right.
Perfect.
So let's move on. Okay, design drawings. Okay, we forgot to mention that. Okay, design drawings are also equally important. Okay, and also when you give the design drawing, okay, it has to be also attested. Okay, design drawing given on such and such a date. It has to be stamped and signed so that there are no changes should take place on the design drawings unless it is approved by both the parties. Right, let's look at what are contract bonds. Okay, bid bond, which is 5 to 10% of the contract price. Okay, now comes the performance bond. Okay, the performance bond is applicable to the main contractor. Let's say it's a turnkey project. Okay, and the performance bond is applicable to the main contractor who has to put in 50% of the contract price as a performance bond. Now, one thing I would like to add in this particular instance, the main contractor is subject to liquidated damages. Okay, if the project is running late or it is not provided as scheduled and there is a delay, the contractor is subject to penalty according to what is specified in the contract. So performance bond is very crucial. Okay, that's why I worked with quite a number of people in that category, and they won't allow you to even breathe. You're always on pinpricks, okay, because they have a time schedule. Right, so that's called the performance bond. Then you have the maintenance bond, which you have with other subcontractors for doing the civil work or electrical work. So you have the maintenance bond with other subcontractors. Likewise, you have the payment bond in general. Okay. Right. Sham, you want to add on to anything in this category?
No, it's perfectly okay, Professor.
Thank you. Right. Now look at the type of insurance. Okay. Why should we take insurance? Okay. Just as I would like to add a little explanation on the insurance part. Okay. In a project scenario, okay, there are two types of insurance. There is materials which are being shipped out from a foreign country or it is being transported within the country. Okay, so there are quite a number of material movements, cargo movements from outside or within the country. Now these materials have to be insured. Okay, they have to be insured on a door-to-door basis for covering all risk. Okay, that's called cargo transit insurance. Okay, then you have, as a contractor, then you have other insurances which come under the category of liability insurance. What liability insurance means, it's called the risk of operation. Okay, as a contractor, you have several risks which has to be insured. For example, like the public liability insurance provides coverage against bodily injury and property damage to third parties as a result of construction activities. Okay, so this is called the public liability insurance. Then comes the builder's risk insurance, protects against loss or damage of structures and equipment. Now here is one thing you got to understand. In this particular category, it can vary from project to project and from country to country. The liability of a contractor, for example, for road construction or building a bridge, okay, the contractor is liable for a certain number of years. Okay, if any damage happens or there is any consequential damage wherein people died, okay, then the liability on the contractor is very high. So all these factors have to be taken into consideration when we talk about the liability insurance, which is the risk of operation. Any question in this regard? Are things clear? Please understand, these are all important fundamentals we are talking about. Any questions? See, for example, like here, comprehensive automotive liability insurance. The government insists, okay, yes, there is every car which is on the road has to have a liability insurance. Okay, the best example which comes to mind for a liability insurance is your credit card. Your credit card is issued by the bank, okay, because banks issue so many credit cards. So the bank cannot take over the liability of each and every credit card. So these credit cards which are issued by the bank are, okay, the banks they underwrite these things with an insurance company. Okay, so it's the insurance company, or it could be a consortium depending on the type of insurance. Okay, they underwrite this with other insurance companies. Okay, so and the loss depending on the credit card will vary from country to country. And as far as Dubai is concerned or UAE is concerned, I can talk about it. It's 20,000 dirhams per credit card. That is the liability which the bank can get if somebody does not pay the amount and walks away with the money. Okay, so likewise, this is called the liability insurance, which is essential part of doing business. Right. What is a change order administration? Okay. Before we proceed, let me ask the question. What is the need for a change order in a project? Is it mandatory? Is it required? Why should you have it? If you have taken so much of trouble to come up with a contract in a project, okay, still, where is the room for change order? Is it something artificial or is it something man-made? Because I've also heard there are certain malicious people bidding for a job, they purposely undercoat and get the contract, okay? And then they come up with all kinds of change orders, okay, to rectify the situation, okay? So what exactly do you understand by change orders? Is it mandatory that you got to have change orders? Okay, anybody from the participants? Is it good or bad? Let's put it that way. Is a change order good or bad? Is it a necessary evil? Right, nobody wants to answer it.
You gave the answer away.
Right, I know. Okay.
So I think it's good, sir.
It's good.
Provides more flexibility to
Right, correct, absolutely. It gives flexibility and adaptability to the project, okay? However well conceived the project is, there can be issues which can come up, which is beyond the scope of the owner as well as the contractor. And it has to be accommodated for the benefit of the contract so as to continue with the performance of the contract. Okay, so let's see the change order more in detail. Eliminate unnecessary cost, time, impact as a result of processing project work outside the scope of contract. Okay, eliminate the unnecessary cost and time impact as a result of the processing project work outside the scope of contract. Okay, there can be contentions whether it is inside the contract or outside the contract. Okay, so there can be arguments, there can be disputes as to what is the scope of work, whether it comes in the scope of work or not. So what you have to understand is the scope of work has to be detailed. Okay, you can, in a contract, you can have more appendix, wherein in the appendix you will detail the scope of work minutely for each section, what is included and what is not included. Okay, what is additional? Right, contract change clause. Fixed price contract requires a change clause. Okay, which we talked about it. Establish the owner's right to make changes and provides mechanism for their administration and resolution. Okay, right. So it's essential that for the progress and the well-being of a contract, that there has to be the change orders have to be looked at more logically and see, yes, whether it's absolutely essential, whether there is a truth in what is being stated. Okay, a change is not a claim. See, this is what everyone has to understand. This is a norm. A change is not a claim. See, this is what lots of people feel, that you're not coming with a claim. You have faced a situation and that has to be eradicated. And it has to be eradicated through proper dialogue. Right. Types of changes. Shyam, you want to take over?
So there are three types of changes that can happen in a contract. One is a formal change, which happens via the contract clause that requires to be changed. The other we call as a constructive one, which is through the action of an owner that has the effect of informing and directing a change which would not have been documented earlier. So as time goes by, as we talked of in a project or a contract scenario, there could be certain things that were not anticipated and therefore require to be navigated quickly in order not to lose on the time and schedule. It could, or maybe it could not affect the budget. So that is a separate consequence that happens. The third one is cardinal, which is basically out of scope of the original contract. It was not at all planned. It was not at all conceived in the original contract. And when one talks of that, then one steps back because it now goes out of the purview of the contract that already is in place, and therefore the two parties need to come back onto the drawing board all over again. So there is the element of renegotiating the entire contract that happens. If it were the entire contract, or if it were the piece or partial contract that has become a cardinal change.
Thank you, Shan. What are the change orders? What are change orders? Virtually all projects have change orders. Need to recognize their implications with an open mind. Set up an effective management system to handle them. Okay. Now, when you say set up an effective management team, these are people who should have sufficient knowledge, technical as well as contractual, as well as academic, as well as legal. They should have sufficient knowledge to scrutinize and understand whether it is a real change what they are asking or is it a fictitious one. Okay, so the cause and effect should be studied and then assessed properly. Minimize cost and time impact and prevent costly legal action. See, this is the worst thing one can happen. Okay, now we will have on the last day, day 6, a dispute method resolution in a contract management, where we'll see a case study to this effect. Modification of the contract. Okay, modification of the contract has to be carried out. Okay, now what happens is, if the contract, this is something which I mentioned in passing on the first day, often a contract is made by the legal counsel. What they do is they would take up an old contract and then they try to modify it. Okay, but it is insufficient. What is required is the expertise of a project manager or an operator who has got experience in project management should be the one who should suggest what are the applications which should be included in the project. What are the challenges what he has faced. Okay, now here comes, can anybody equate or link to what I'm trying to say? How will you, what is the basis in which you will fall back for proper guidance in this fact? Is my question clear? We are on contract. Okay, this is a very important principle. Okay, I will give you a clue which we talked about on the first day. Okay, so I want you to understand the importance of what we talked on the first day. So that's why I'm linking here. What is it? Okay, let's analyze what is it that we talked about on the first day. Okay, my colleague Shyam explained more in detail a particular aspect. And what was that subject? Contracts charter. Agreed? I'm giving you the clue. So within the contract charter, he showed you 8 to 9 topics. Okay, Now, each of the topic should have sections and subsections, wherein the entire knowledge and the data bank has to be incorporated of the organization in detail. Okay, are you with me? So whenever you have a situation like a change order, where do you go back? What is the cardinal rule? Okay, you should always go back to the charter, contract charter, wherein you have a data management system, wherein all the previous instances as to how a project has been managed, what are the change orders has come in, what and how it has been carried out, everything is documented. So you've got to resort to your documentation system in the company. Am I making things clear? Because I'm talking from a very, I'm not an academician here. I'm talking from a very application-oriented mind. Okay, this is how you've got to analyze the contract. Okay, from an application point of view. Is there a history to it? Why did it happen? And how was it corrected? Okay, so let me move on. Sources of change orders. Unanticipated site conditions, which is a common thing. Okay, owner requested design modifications, additions or deletions. See, in a purchase order, just for information, when a purchase order has been raised, okay, most of the owners or the vendors would maximum accommodate 2 changes once a purchase order has been issued, not more than that. Okay, it again depends on the company to company. Okay, normally 2 design changes is the maximum they would accommodate within a period of the first 1 year's time. Okay, not okay. Let's say the lead time is 3 years. Okay, you can't keep on changing. So there is a time limit under which, okay, any change has to be notified. Okay, and if it costs additional money, yes, okay, and that has to be renegotiated and agreed upon. Right, owner request, okay, that's the decision, then addition or deletion, then clarification of contract documents. Okay, the contract documents have to be very specific, and again, what I like to say is that the contract documents can differ from country to country. Okay, according to the law of the land and according to the purpose of the contract. For example, in the Gulf countries, especially Saudi, there are quite a number of local manufacturers out there. Okay, so since they are local manufacturers, the items imported on their behalf are customs duty exempted. So when it is customs duty exempted, there are specific instructions in the contract, sorry, in the purchase order to start with, as to how the documentation has to be carried out. Okay, what are the documents, attachments which are required? What are the shipping marks? All kinds of nitty-gritty things are incorporated in the purchase order, and it has to be abided. And by any chance, see, listen carefully, this is the catch. If it does not happen and the ultimate consignee is obliged to pay customs duty, it will be back charged to the vendor. Please understand. So how important these sort of instructions are, and if you do not comply, you can get back charged. Okay, typical reasons for disagreements: change or design development. Okay, so make sure these things are incorporated in the purchase order or in the appendix. Okay, then scope of change, material cost, equipment rental rates. Okay. Now, when it comes to equipment rental rates, okay, normally it can be taken on a lease, on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, half yearly, or whatever it is. Okay, or it can be on a per day as well. So it has to be properly, all this has to be stated properly. Okay, what is the basis for the rental? Then acceptable profit. Okay. Now the acceptable profit comes in cost-based contract, like what we have been saying before. Okay. Between the parties, they have to agree for what is an acceptable profit. Landed cost plus 15 or 10%, whatever it comes, whatever has been agreed, overhead cost. Consequential effect of change, right? Shyam, you want to take over this particular part? Consequential effect of the change.
So if we go back, we talked of the effects of change that are there. Yeah, the types of change, we talked of 3 of them. There is the formal, there is the constructive, and then there is the cardinal. There are 3 types of changes that are applicable in any contract. So the consequence of a change can be attributed, therefore, to any one of these 3. So it could be, like we spoke, for a formal change via the contract change clause. In a constructive type of change, where during the course of the contract or during the course of, let's say, a construction, there is a challenge and therefore a change is necessitated, which would not impact adversely the schedule and the time. It may or may not have an impact or effect on the cost. So that is another consequence of change. And finally, we spoke of the cardinal change, which is something that was completely either ignored or not foreseen when the contract was drawn up. And therefore, one needs to come back, sit again on the drawing table and renegotiate that contract, which will therefore impact and have a consequential effect of that specific change. So these are the 3 changes that one talks about majorly.
Right, Shyam, I'm here. Okay.
Yeah. Any questions?
Right. We are moving to, yes, we have come to the end of the first part. Okay. Any questions, please feel to ask. We have another very important session, that is a contract risk management. So before we move on to that, any clarification on what we have been talking about? Was it an interesting topic? Was there much to learn? Right. Okay. Since there is no feedback, okay, we're moving to the next one, which is the contract risk management. Okay, let's look at the learning objectives to understand the different types of risk involved in contract management. To understand in detail the risk management methodology. To understand the type of risk response and effective response. To clarify the methods by which risk can be mitigated and transferred. To understand the various types of insurance available to projects. Okay, right. So this is what project management versus risk management. That is what we are going to see today. Okay, so let's see the risk management. So what is a contract risk? So what is risk? Let's try to understand what is a risk. A measure of the probability and the impact of not achieving a defined project objective. A measure of the probability and the impact of not achieving a defined project objective. Do you feel that is the only reason for a risk? It can be one of the reasons for a risk, right, Shisham?
Absolutely. It could be just one of them.
It's only one of them. Okay, the risk can happen at any time. It's the occurrence of an event, the probability of the occurrence of an event, the impact of the occurrence of event. Okay, so the risk can be anything. Okay, it can happen at any time without any knowledge about anything. Okay, so risk involves uncertainty of the future events, the what of the event and when of the event. Okay, so please bear in mind that risk is something which is always with you. Okay, what can happen to you is something which you have to understand. We all try to make the best out of it and to avoid the risk as much as possible. Okay, now I said from a personal point of view. Okay, please don't take my word. Let's look at it from an organizational point of view. Okay, organizations cannot afford to have such sloppy attitude like what I have. Okay, or what I just said. From an organization point of view, you have to think much more realistically. Okay, and holistically as well. So this is where the importance of an organization having risk management policy as such, so that all the activities carried out by the organization in various spheres, everything has to be covered. Okay, there are people in certain organizations, they don't like to spend money on insurance. Okay, I'm reminded of, sorry to quote this example, I'm reminded about Saudi Arabia. A couple of years back, they believed, and some of the companies practiced, that insurance is haram. That means is evil. Okay, but as the country developed, as the country changed, yes, things happened. Things, evolved over a period of time. And I've been working on the Jubail Industrial Complex. Okay, it's world's largest industrial complex. There was no insurance at that time, but by the time, it took almost 5 to 8 years to complete it. By the time the industrial project was completed in Jubail, which is the world's largest industrial complex, the government had no other go but to get a consortium of people to insure these projects, because they faced the reality, because so much money was being put in. So 2-3 refineries, then, primary industries, all kinds of things. Almost 35 kilometers is the radius of the industrial complex. Okay, so this is what happened. So what I'm trying to say is that as an organization, you got to have a risk management policy. Okay, likewise, a country also, or a state. Okay, for all government projects or enterprises, they should come under certain risk management policies. Right, let's look at the risk management process definition. Okay, Shyam, you want to talk about the process?
Absolutely. It's actually, if you look at it, it's pretty straightforward. So when one wants to conduct risk management, or when wants to adopt the policy of risk management, you need to go sequentially in planning, in identifying, in analyzing, in responding, and in monitoring and controlling of the project or the activity. So the sequence is pretty straightforward. The sequence is quite important, because one cannot afford to jump, let's say, from a planning to straight away responding. Because once you plan, then you need to identify what are the areas, we talked of sections and subsections, which are the areas that where one may need to mitigate a risk. Why should I mitigate the risk there? And therefore the analysis portion comes in. What would be my response to do that? Yes, I take a risk management policy, and then I start monitoring and controlling them in the project to see how many times do I have to or have I had to adopt or use that risk management policy? So if this cycle is completed, if these steps are followed and the cycle is completed, then that gives holistically the entire risk management process definition itself.
Thank you, Shyam. I have a question for everybody. Okay, it's off the cuff. Now, Shyam has explained the very risk management process, okay, in a contract. Okay, I'm looking at from a management perspective. From a management perspective, before we get into any contract or any country for that matter to carry out a project, we do carry out certain feasibility studies. Okay, I'm sure you must have heard the PESTEL analysis. PESTEL, political, economic, social, technology, environment, and legal. PESTEL analysis. Okay, what is the purpose of this PESTEL analysis? PESTEL. What are we trying to do? And what is the correlation of risk with the PESTEL analysis? What do you think of it, Shyam?
It is, if I were to, I may be wrong here, sir, but if I were to amplify what I want to convey, it is somewhat similar to a risk management policy itself. Let me take an example to elaborate further what I want to tell, that I want to put up a greenfield project in another country, in a neighboring country, because I am finding my logistics costs or the costs of distribution to be very high to move them from India to the neighboring country. Now, the risk management or the risk process that I'm adopting is basically what you now spoke of, which is the PESTEL analysis, where I look at the political environment, if I were to put a factory, the economic condition, the social condition. I mean, if I were to put a factory there, then the entire capacity of the factory would have to serve to that specific region or location. Would that, I mean, you know, there are far too many other factors that would come into play basically with the PESTEL analysis, which goes hand in hand with the risk management process also, which would make me as a buyer or as an organization aware of whether I should take a plunge in having a greenfield project in another location, or should I continue to serve from this location itself?
Can I say, Shyam, it's a complementary function?
Absolutely. I mean,
I think complementary tool. Complementary tool.
Absolutely, sir. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a complementary tool that helps you do that.
Right. So this is the risk management process, what we are going to do. Okay, let's start with the planning as usual. The process of deciding how to approach and conduct risk management, the level of risk management, the type of risk management, visibility of the risk management. So here it is the responsibility of the planning group of the project to undertake all these functions. These functions minutely with all reverence. They should understand the implications thoroughly, okay? And they should have a brainstorming session, okay? Because people may differ in their views. So you've got to have a brainstorming session to understand the level, the type, and the visibility of the risk management. See, sometimes the visibility of the risk may not be apparent at all, correct? See, for example, I may be taking an odd example. Okay, people who are working offshore, okay? There are so much of risk which everybody knows about it, but there are certain health hazards which are not visible. Over a period of time, if you are employed, okay, I know for a fact, I was dealing with a couple of people in Abu Dhabi, where they have a refinery, okay, right inside the sea, okay. People work there 15 days and they have a break, and they stay there only. But people have told me over a period of time, people have started getting occupational diseases, certain cough, certain breathing difficulties. Okay, these are called these are not visible. These are invisible risks involved because they can be classified as occupational hazards. Okay, so I just made a mention of it. So we've got to do a thorough investigation as to when you do the planning. Need for risk management planning, reflect the organization risk attitude and risk tolerance. Okay, now when you have as an organization risk management policy, don't you feel that this can be taken care of? There is no compromise. The organization is very certain as to what they want to do, and as an organization, irrespective of the project what you're in, the company has laid out certain rules and regulations which they have to abide by. See, in countries like US, okay, I know I've heard for a fact when an employee is taken in the organization for the first time, okay, his table, his chair, okay, his workstation, everything is being evaluated. Even the chair, what type of chair is being provided, so that, okay, this is called ergonomics. Okay, ergonomics means the language of the body. Okay, so according to the employee, he has to have ergonomically compatible workstation. Otherwise, you know what happens? The organization can be, the employee can take the organization for occupational hassles and also claim a very large amount from the organization towards a failure, okay? Because he got a disease after being employed in an organization, okay? It's a long time measure, but these things can happen. So organizations are very careful as to, okay, even working on computers, there should be, okay, a place for the hand wrist. The wrist has to be supported. There are all kinds of measures, okay, which the organization has to undertake before an employee is given his proper workstation. Okay, based on project scope, tailored to project work breakdown structure. See, like the work stage, the project work has to be broken down into various levels. Okay, then reflected in risk breakdown structures, results in risk management plan. Now, all these things, what you're seeing now, are component parts and parcel of the risk management policy of the organization. Do you agree, Shyam? They are all part and parcel of the risk management policy of the organization. It's not very many companies, okay, only multinational companies and very enlightened companies will have these sort of things. It's very detailed one. They do not want to they look after the employees, not just as a punitive measure, because they care for the employees, okay? And reputation of the organization as well. No accident policy. This is one thing which a lot of companies do, that no accident policies. I mean, no accident numbers in a given period of time. Okay, so the risk management policy entails all these activities. Okay, so that the organization will not come under any public. It will not come in the public for anything which has not been carried out properly. Okay, so should be conducted early during project planning. Outsourcing strategy. Where are you buying it from? Which country? Is the country blacklisted. Okay, nowadays blacklist has been taken off. Otherwise, yes, blacklisting was there. Acquisition strategy. From which country are you buying from, or how do you, okay, these are all logistics comes in as well. Okay, these are all part and parcel. All these three come in the logistics strategic planning. Okay, your outsourcing strategy, your acquisition strategy, your contract strategy. Okay, they're all part and parcel of it, which has got an influence in the risk management planning as well. Right. So let's go to the risk identification. How does your organization identify risk? The process of determining which risk might affect the project and documenting those risk characters. See, the risks which might affect the project, documenting those risks. Okay, provided you are able to foresee these things. There are quite a number of the risks which are not being conceived at all. Okay, so you have to have sufficient room for accommodating such risk which has not emerged ever. Our typical example, what I can say, which you all agree, is the pandemic situation, what we have just gone through. Okay, the pandemic COVID situation was never anticipated. Okay, and we have all gone through for the last 2 years, conducted by project team managers, subject experts, customers, and end users. Okay, now even when what I've heard from the IT field, okay, software developers, okay, they know, okay, how to prepare the software, but they do seek the help of academicians or people who are involved in application, who are operators, in order to understand more in detail what the challenges they have undergone. Okay, to get the first-hand information. The reason being so that the risk can be understood properly and it can be nullified when they make a software, so that glitches will not happen again. Right, Shyam, you want to take over this one? Again, it's a continuation of what I've been just saying.
This in fact exemplifies what Professor Matthew spoke of. So the risks can be attributed to, and this is just a sample. There could be more than this also. It could be attributed to the scope statement. It could be attributed to the budget. It could be attributed to the schedule. It could be attributed or based on the work breakdown by topic and by subtopic. It could be a risk breakdown structure itself potentially, or it could be a responsibility assignment matrix when one is working on a specific contract or a part of contract. So it is purely performed as an iterative process and would not stop till the entire life cycle of the project is completed. So what does that mean? That once you have identified the various parameters or various stakeholders, various components which could be potential risks, you would need to monitor them at various stages in the life cycle of the project that is, or of the contract that is being performed. And therefore, it is essential that one maintains a register, a risk register, if one can be more specific, of for all the various attributes or the parameters that we talked of on what happened when for each one of them, if there was an incident that happened. What were the responses or the corrective or measures that were taken to mitigate those risks or to come back to normalcy, and then make the updated RBS that we spoke of, which is the risk breakdown structure on how it started, what mitigation efforts, and how did the entire process come back on track. So
thank you, Shyam. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, so this is extremely crucial as one moves ahead in the identification portion.
I would like to add on to Shyam one more point here. There is something called responsibility assigned matrix. I would like to expand this a little more. We talked about risk management policy. In the risk management policy, there's a very important section called, okay, risk assignment matrix. Okay. Now, it is essential in the risk management matrix, you got to analyze the scope of work of each of the organizations the organization is working on. Okay, there is a matrix. Okay, what you're trying to do is you're trying to analyze the scope of work of the different functions within the various organizations, and you're trying to identify which are the risks, which are the organization, and what type of risks are the topmost. Okay, as we go along, we will see there are different levels of risk. Okay, one can be low, one can be medium, one can be high. So it's up to the organization to decide whether they want to go for a high risk operation or not. Got it? So the risk matrix, identification matrix is so important. Okay. Right. So now we'll go to the quality risk analysis. Process of examining the identified risk to determine the probability and the impact of the risk. Okay, so this is what I just said. Okay, you got to have a matrix. Okay, risk matrix analysis, wherein each and every scope of work has to be analyzed minutely. Whether it is in what category it is coming in. Is it coming in medium or low or high? Okay, now wherever it is high, the organization has to take a very, let's say, a strategic decision whether it is worthwhile to carry out that operation at all, because it's very high. Okay, let me give you a case study which comes to mind. Okay, this is the time when I was back in Canada doing my studies. Okay, 1977, 78. At that time, there was the Ford Pinto was there. It was a small car, like the Volkswagen. Engine was at the end. So during the design period itself, some of the technical people came up saying that since the engine is at the rear end of the car, the chances, the probability of the car getting on fire is very high. If there is a collision from the back, the car can go on fire. So the probability is very high. Okay, so there was an argument within the top management. What is to be done? Okay, so the technical people were very emphatic. Yes, the design has to be changed. Can you imagine what our accounts, our finance people can come up with? They have always ready-made answers. So they came up with an engineered calculation saying that yes, assumptions, if so many people have got fatal injuries, the maximum amount what the company, the Ford, has to provide is only so much, millions. Okay, so they were equating the cost of design versus the cost of paying the compensation. Okay, and finally, as the accountants will always have the day, and the management also, because whatever finance people say, they have a tendency to listen to it because as more realistic, okay, as more practical. Okay, so finally, the car came out into the market, And as expected, there were so many fatal accidents. It came to such a state they had to pay much more than they ever anticipated. See, look at what has happened. How many lives have been lost? Who is accountable for that? You are looking at more on the financial part only, and how many people have lost their life. So this is why when a design has to be changed, okay, it has to be carried out. The risk factor has to be analyzed properly from various angles. Right. Includes qualitative and quantitative analysis. Okay, so the risk has to be looked at like what we have just seen from both the angles, qualitative as well as quantitative analysis. Qualitative risk analysis. The process of assessing each risk event to estimate the likelihood of risk occurrence and the impact of risk event in terms of cost, schedule, and performance. Process of assessing each risk event to estimate the likelihood of risk occurrence. See, like the example what I gave for the Ford Pinto. Okay, it's a typical example, and the impact of the risk event in terms of cost schedule. Do you think you can ever estimate these costs precisely? Yes, the accountants can. Nobody else in the world can do that. Okay, and if the top management goes according to what the accountants say, then, you know, God bless them. Okay, because they are not concerned about the reputation of the company. The same incident, there is another case study very famous with Ford Endeavor. Okay, some bright person in the accounts felt, okay, when they were analyzing the quotations given by various tire companies, they were analyzing the various quotations received. Okay, then somebody chose the Bridgestone tires because comparatively it was much cheaper. And the contract was awarded to Bridgestone tires. Okay, then what happens was, okay, the vehicle was rolled out, and one by one, the number of accidents or tire bursts, which results in fatal accidents, increased tremendously. Okay, and all the aggrieved parties went to the court, and there was a ruling. This was a disaster. There was a ruling whereby Ford was obliged to change all the Bridgestone tires which was supplied to Endeavor all over the world and bring back the old tires. Can you imagine this? I'm a witness to this. Okay, I'm a witness to it in 1992 in Jeddah port. Okay, Ford Endeavors on the ship were all downloaded in the port, and the tires had to be changed. New ones had to be put in. The penalty is they had to ship it back to the US, all the damaged ones. Can you imagine the cost involved? Then various inquiries were conducted. You know what has resulted in this? There was an agreement between Bridgestone company and somebody in this organization wherein they accepted second tires. Second quality tires were accepted. Can you imagine that? Probably some money would have flown somewhere. See how risk has been compromised. The second quality tires were the ones which were given to Ford. Okay, and look at the disaster, what has happened. See, this is how we compromise on quality. Okay, this is why we compromise, we forget the risk element. Right, I'll just move it fast because time, okay, we are going to exceed today the time. I think, madam, you will have to excuse us. Quality of results of quality risk analysis will lead to further quantity analysis of high priority risks or the development response of high priority. Right, now conducting using risk matrix approach. This is what I've been saying quite a while now. Okay, if you have a risk management policy for the organization, you've got to have a risk matrix approach taking into consideration, I'm repeating again whatever I said, all the scope of work has to be understood, it should be checked properly, and it should be reviewed. Okay, I'll just move on a little faster. Shyam, would you like to take over?
Sir. So the risk matrix that we spoke of, you classify the risks not only as low, medium, and high, but I would add another dimension also, which is at the macro level or at the micro level also, going down into the activities to when you have a section and a subsection to go down into the details. Like we say that the devil is in the details. You see whether the risk is high and at a micro level, what would the impact or what would the cascading effect have as an impact on the consequence for the contract that you have been awarded with. So it is crucial that you have the matrix put in first, where you define what qualifies as a low, as a medium, and as a high risk potentially, and whether it is on a macro or a micro level. And you do both the qualitative and quantitative risk analysis to rank them as what is going to be a complete showstopper versus ones that can be mitigated by remedial steps that an organization or a contractor takes. Right. So for instance, what Professor Matthew talked about in the high risk and at the micro level for the Ford endeavors using Bridgestone tires, the remedial action and the mitigation that had to be taken was a product recall. They call it as a product recall across the world, other than giving compensation to those who lost their lives in the road accident. So not only did the organization have to face the impact of the compensation which ran into billions, they also had to do a product recall which again ran into billions. So that is the type of risk analysis that one needs to do when one is entering into a contract and one moves forward inside into the contract.
Thank you, Shyam. Right, so we are moving to the quantitative risk analysis. Right, when you look at the quantitative risk analysis, the process of numerically analyzing the effect of identified risk on project objectives. Okay, we have talked about it, so I'm not elaborating. Conducted using various quantitative techniques, probability distributions, expected value analysis, decision tree analysis. Okay, now I've been talking, I think I talked on the first day, the expected value analysis. Okay, this is a technique which is very much used in US, okay, especially in the defense forces. For all projects, they have to carry out an expected value analysis, okay, wherein along with the project phasing out, what is the current state of the project, what level it has reached. They are also obliged to show at the same time how much money has been consumed. Okay, so in our context of risk analysis, the expected value analysis has got lots of significance, because this will give you, it's like a barometer which will give you at any point of time where exactly is the contract. Are we running on the cost or on the quality? Okay, this has to be analyzed at all given point of time. Okay, now decision making, a decision tree analysis, everybody knows it. Okay, So these are all methods by which the quantity risk analysis can be carried out. Okay, then like what Shyam has been saying, you have to have registers. Everything has to be logged. Everything has to be entered in the register. Updated prioritized tasks, updated to risk management plan, updated to project management plan. See, once you have proper data management system, all these things can be incorporated using the data management system, wherein all the corresponding data can be entered in the in the system, which are in the system as well. Okay, risk management response. I'll try to make it a little more faster. Risk management process. Right, Shyam, you want to take it?
Sure. So when you talk of a risk response plan, it's basically a process in which one develops options and determines actions to reduce the threats. When you say actions to reduce the threats, it again comes down to mitigation of these so that the project or the contract objectives are achieved. And these obviously are based on the results of risk analysis that you are carrying and doing. They assign risks. Risks are basically assigned to risk owners. So in each step of the way in a contract management, let's say there is an electrical contract, there is a mechanical contract, there is a piping contract, there is an HVAC contract. Every one of them has a specific owner, and the risks are all assigned to these owners, who then categorize them as what we spoke on: low, medium, and high. And it applies to resources and activities inside the overall broader framework of the risk management plan. Right?
Thank you, Shyam.
So when you move forward, you ask the question of how does your organization respond to a potential risk that is there. So the planning would then come back to tell you, once you have done the exercise that we talked of just a while ago on the risk response planning, whether you're trying to avoid it. The risk analysis will determine, the strategy that you are using avoids the risk completely or transfers it to a certain extent to somewhere, some other activity, or you are mitigating the risk, or you accept the risk. And when you accept the risk, obviously there are two ways in which you can go. Either you face the risk or the consequences of the risk and move forward, or you sit back, take a step back, take 2 steps back, and see how you can rework your entire contract management to ensure that that risk does not happen again.
Thank you, Shyam. Right. This is risk avoidance. Okay, part of the risk response planning. Risk avoidance. How do we avoid the risk? Eliminate the source of any unacceptable risk. Okay. Now, even if you look at your own household, let's forget about the contract for a while. Look at your own household. Don't you feel that your mother, okay, or your wife, if you're married, okay, has also learned risk avoidance in her own ways? Right, Shyam?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me take an example.
Yes.
Let me take one example straight away.
Yes. Okay. I always classify. Yes. Go ahead, please.
What they say as risk avoidance, for instance, in safety norms, when you get up in the morning, let's say to boil water to make your cup of tea, open the window first. turn on the gas next,
Correct.
light the gas subsequently. This
Very
is
good example.
primarily so that any unleaked gas that is there as a residue overnight can go away or is diluted by the air that comes in. It is an example of mitigating that risk.
Let's look at the risk transfer. Shift the risk impact to another party. Typically involves the use of various instruments such as insurance, performance bonds, warranties, guarantees through the use of specific contract types. Okay, so this is something which is straightforward, which we have talked about it. So how do you transfer the risk? Okay, this is where we talked about liability insurance. Okay, insurances which are the part and parcel of the risk of your operation. Right. Okay. Shyam, you want to take on the risk mitigation?
Yeah, so the mitigation, what does it do? It reduces the probability and the impact of the risk of the event or the eventuality of the risk. And it has various activities that are there. You can mitigate the risk by having, let's say, an alternate design. If it were, let's say, a pressure reactor or a pressure vessel, you could have demonstrated through your previous data bank that is there as statistics on a risk that was going to happen because of a certain activity that is going to be performed in a certain way by navigating your way through it. Or you could have, instead of the full pressure vessel coming in, you could have a prototype to see whether how the prototype design works in a simulated environment, so that you are in a position to see in the real environment what would then have happened. Right? So you do not do the entire thing in one go of building a huge, the entire pressure vessel, but you have a prototype built in a lab scale to demonstrate and to see for yourself how it performs within the confines of the lab under the temperatures, conditions, pressures, whatever may be. It has to work in real time. There are key performance parameters that are there for various equipments or various activities. You test them. There is modeling and simulation done to ensure that the activity that you are performing or going to perform in real time on a big project gives you the desired result when you are simulating the model. And finally, you use open systems to ensure that you are in a position to carry out all these activities in one go completely.
Thank you, Shyam. Then comes the risk response planning, risk acceptance. See, in a project, having taken the project, having studied the project in detail, you understand there are certain risks are there in the project. Okay, you have accepted the risk wholeheartedly and professionally. Now it's a question, when you want to implement it, how do you implement it? Okay, it's a conscious decision you have taken. Actively acknowledge and accept the risk without planning to mitigate it. See, you wanted the contract at any cost, but then you had very little knowledge as to how to mitigate it. But having got the contract, then you accepted it, then it's up to you to find ways and means to mitigate the contract. You're forced to do that. Okay, so these are all, you cannot take everything for granted. There are certain things you have to do it, and then, okay, accept it with wholeheartedly, and you will find ways and means of doing it. Right, strategy includes ensuring adequate resources, personnel cost schedule exists to address the risk in all event it occurs. Okay. Now, coming back to the point what I'm just mentioning, it is for you to come up with strategy. Okay. How do you have accepted the risk? You have no idea as to how to mitigate the risk, but then you have to find educate resources in personnel, or okay, sometimes there are ways in which it can be done, but then it is not cost effective. Okay. So you have to come up with a measure whereby you are accepting the risk, but you are minimizing the risk. So that is what the strategy can be. Okay. Right. Risk response planning. Results of risk response planning includes documenting the selected risk response strategy to the risk management plan and related documents. See, this is a part and parcel, a very important function in the project management. Everything has to be logged in on a daily basis. Okay, what has happened? What are the challenges? Okay, how was the situation rectified? Okay, and finally, when the project is completed, the project manager has to provide a summary as to what has really transpired. Okay, it was a pleasure when I was working for the Australian University, University of Wollongong in Dubai. Yes, we were supposed to do that. Okay, at the end of a semester, we had to prepare our own reports for the management. Okay, what all challenges what we faced? What are the difficulties we faced in the curriculum? What was the feedback? What was the general feedback given by the students? Okay, all these feedbacks are very essential for proper planning. Okay, and also from an organization or from a university point of view or an organization point of view, these things will help to plan the risk involved. Okay, especially when you're dealing with students. Okay, there are norms which you have to, and that too, depending on the country where you're operating, you have to understand the local sentiments as well. That's another very important factor. Okay, under no circumstances you can infringe on their sentiments. Okay, even what you try to explain, the examples what you give. See, these are risk factors of an academician as well. Okay, so you have to plan very carefully what you talk and how you talk. Okay, so I just gave an example of the education sector, what we are facing as well. Ensuring resources are acquired for implementing the selected risk response strategy for each identified risk. Okay, I'm just the tender comes into my head as well. Okay, you cannot distinguish between nationalities. Every nationality is the same, whether he's an expatriate or a local. Everybody has to be treated equally. Right. So coming to the end of today's session, risk monitoring and control. Risk monitoring, the systematic process of tracking and evaluating the effectiveness of implemented risk response strategy. Okay, what you're trying to do is you're trying to sum up. Okay, let's say we are coming to the end of the project. Visualize it in that fashion. We're coming to the end of the project. What all things happened? How did we monitor the various risks? What are the measures we took to control it or to minimize it? Involves application of the project management control techniques such as earned value management. We just talked about it. Performed through project life cycle. Okay, the project life cycle was minutely analyzed and every step was taken to ensure that the project life cycle is not affected in any way. Project monitoring, okay, results in updated to risk management plan of the organization as well as for an individual project and related documents. So documentation is the key. Nowadays, since data management is used extensively, okay, everything has to be documented and it should be archived. And then, like what we have been saying in the first class, it should become part and parcel of the charter, okay, contract charter. May also result in change request to plan work processes and activities to reflect the corrective and preventive actions. Right. See, at the end of the day, okay, I leave this to Ram because he likes to talk very much about it.
No, it basically boils down to just one thing. There is a role and there is a responsibility for risk management. It should be amplified and made very clear as to who owns the corporate risk management process. It should be made extremely clear on what the risk management training and process improvements are. What should be the training, and then what needs to be as process improvements as one goes through the life cycle. And finally, who owns specific contract risk issues. So typically, if you see more and more organizations, at least some of the organizations that I have worked in, I have worked with a multinational called Procter & Gamble, where you had one, we continue, the organization continues to build on the risk management process. This is, mind you, a running organization where the risk manager has people in the engineering function, in the process function, and in the instrumentation function, assuming these are the three functions where the risks are the highest. Not to mention any expansions are happening, so therefore there is the civil and contract activities that are there. The risk manager has the responsibility here to train the people within those functions on process improvements to do the activity and to discharge the duties much better. The risk manager also has the responsibility or also has the powers to stop a running function if he or she finds that it is detrimental to the overall objective of the organization as a whole, till remedial measures are put in place and demonstrated and the activity can be carried out. So that's why it's written in orange or brown right at the end. Not everybody should be a risk manager, but everybody should know about the risk management process and know their role in the risk management cycle. Very, very important.
Right. Finally, the critical success factors. Okay. We are just winding up on the topic. We have been talking about risk so much, but please understand the message what you have to carry home. Okay. Now, whatever Shyam has just said it, they are all part and parcel of the risk management of the organization as a whole. Okay. So establish a formal risk management methodology. Once you have a policy, yes, this will be a corollary to it. Assign trained risk managers. Okay. Now, one thing which I forgot to mention when we talk about the matrix. Okay. I think Shyam mentioned it, but I'm just repeating it again. When you have matrix, once you identify low and medium, you have to also identify who are the risk managers as well. Risk owners to it. Okay. So the owners of responsibility can be established at any time, and they are the ones who are responsible to mitigate it as well. Okay. So this is something very important. Then develop a trained cross-functional team. Now, cross-functional team is becoming a norm, which consists of various people from various departments. It can be the legal, it can be the HR, it can be the operational. Okay, all people are involved in the cross-functional teams so that you get different points of view before you can take up a conscious decision. every supplier involvement in procurement process. Okay. Establish a formal contract management methodology. Okay. Risk management skills. Okay, we have been talking about risk management so much, and also I've been talking personally on the risk management policy of the company. So let's see the risk management skills, like what Shyam has been just talking about. Everyone is responsible for risk management. So what are the skills one has to acquire are needed to effectively perform contract management? Risk management should be addressed in all areas of contract management. Okay, so these are all things what we have seen. So in all these activities, there is no exception here. You got to have risk management, you got to acquire, or you got to have a thirst for acquiring risk management skills. It's a part and parcel of your multi-skilling. Okay, I think we have come to the end of today's session. Sorry, we have exceeded by 15 minutes. Shyam, you want to close the session?
Sure, sir. So, so basically, as we spoke about this, we talked about the contract, its administration, and the need to have change orders, a process that puts claim management in place, and the aspect of risk management, which is extremely crucial to ensure that it does not derail the contract management, which would then have a negative impact moving up in the hierarchy on the overall project management. So that is the sum and substance that we talked of, which is basically like, if I were to put it, it's like a bottom-up approach that is happening.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's.
So let's see the whether the participants have any questions. Sorry, we have exceeded the time because there were quite a number of explanations which had to be done. So how was the session, madam?
Sir, it was excellent, sir. We started 10 minutes late, so that's why we just exceeded 10 minutes. Otherwise, it is.
You're too kind.
Thank you. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. Anything what the participants can suggest? We would love to hear. We would love to hear from the participants. Please. Please feel free to comment. Please feel to comment. We want to hear some. Okay, was it too lengthy? I know that is something which you would definitely say. It was a very lengthy session. There is no way to make it short. Any participants? Right? Any suggestions from the participants? If there is no suggestions from the participants, can we call this a day and close the session? Right? Okay, madam, over to you.
I think, sir, there is no suggestions from the participants.
Right.
So, can we close it, sir? We'll call it.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Then thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you so much.
patiently being.
Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, we'll again meet tomorrow at the same time, in the
Sure.
same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. for you. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Solution, leave now, sir.